Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you, as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. Good morning, friends. I am feeling fantastic today. You know, friends, I highly recommend, if you haven't been to Georgia this time, it's a really good time. April's probably just a little better, but you see these beautiful dogwoods and azaleas, and they're really starting to pop right now. Like spring is really here. In fact, it was 83 yesterday, and I'm just loving every moment of it. In fact, I was out gardening so long, I looked at my step counter, and I went over 11,000 steps just from gardening. So yeah, and I'm feeling good. But let's get into today's episode. So I want to start by giving you a couple announcements. Literally today, we are 1 month away from our big Colorado event. That's right. CU Boulder, Colorado College, Grinnell College, Elon, all coming together to meet our listeners and help you understand how colleges make decisions. We'd love to have you join us. Just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com. Check out the events page, April 8th, which is a Wednesday at 6 p.m. That's at Chores High School in Lafayette, which is almost equidistant between Boulder and Denver. Friends, Common App released their 7 prompts, and once again, no change. This is the 3rd straight year. And so you want to know a fantastic thing to do between now and July if you're a junior? Get your personal statement done. Get that puppy out of the way. Because when all of those custom prompts come out August 1st, and some of them you can get earlier, you don't want to be juggling that and your personal statement and all the other obligations you have going on in the summer. And you certainly don't want to be doing all that in the fall. So, you've got, a good 3 3/4 months to get that thing done. Friends, on today's episode, I'm calling an audible. And if you're not familiar with football, an audible is when the quarterback comes up to the line of scrimmage and he recognizes the defense is doing something a little different than what he was expecting. So he says, snap, we can't call the regular play. I got to change the play call. So, yeah, I was going to do something a little different for today. But what happened was, I'd kind of fallen behind on my Florida trip, which is really busy, at going in and checking the Speakpike messages. So I went in and I listened, and there was like a lot of them. And there were a lot of comments from listeners, sentient comments. Sometimes they were feedback on episodes. Sometimes they were just other insightful things. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do something. I'm going to play the listener comments. I'll have a very brief comment after them. Sometimes like really, really brief, and sometimes maybe a little bit longer. And there's literally 10 of them. And I'm going to play these messages from our listeners. By the way, every listener, if we ever play your message, whether it's a question or a comment, you are entitled to one of the 7 books that we're giving away. So if we play your message, feel free to request your book. And we'll play a little blurb to show you how to do that at the end of the messages. But I refer to us as a listening family. I mean that. Knowledge is not confined only to our co-hosts. We have a wealth of knowledge within our listener community. And then after that, we're going to hear part 2 of 4. We've got Katie and Amy and Joe and Reid, all who specialize in helping athletes who want to play in college. And we're talking about tips. If you want to play your sport in the varsity level in college, they're going to give you some great tips on some of the things you need to know. All right, let's dive in. So the first 2 messages, I'm going to play these back to back. They're follow-ups on the discussion that I had, with Hillary and Kate about Facebook parent groups. Are they toxic or are they helpful? Let's take a listen.
Hello. Thank you. Sorry about my voice. I've been a little sick. Thank you so much for the Facebook, the college, the parent Facebook group discussions, fairly helpful, I think, for a lot of parents. My son graduated from NYU last year, and I was on the group all the time. I thought I didn't comment much, but I read a lot, and there's kind of up and down side to it for a school like NYU, big school, kind of low on the community aspect. Some of the parents, especially first semester, freshman year, they'd be talking about, their child not being able to find friends or, stuck in their room and feeling really, left out. Well, that is a problem at NYU. It doesn't have a campus, right? So it's a big school. My son didn't have that issue because he's not shy at all, but it was sort of sad. The parents were trying to make friends for their kids. Oh, where does your daughter live? Oh, mine's in this dorm. Maybe we can get them together, kind of thing. But yeah, that I don't know if that's the best use of the Facebook, or if really the parents should be finding their kids friends at all. But that was one thing I saw quite a bit of over the 4 years. But there's some good things too. Like I was able to direct someone to a psychologist in the community that takes the university health insurance, because the student insurance doesn't cover ongoing therapy. Also, I was able to get a referral for an oral surgeon. I mean, there's a lot of oral surgeons in New York City. Who do you go to? And then I did see a lot of help from the local parents who live in New York. And, they would step up if some student, was having a crisis, according to the parent, and didn't know where to go because NYU, they don't have like the best student support services, I would say. But the local parents were just great at coming through, in times of crises. So I know we all felt, a little better knowing that we all had each other's backs. But just wanted to give you that perspective. And thanks again. You guys are great. Keep up the good work.
Hi, Mark. I'm a parent, and I wanted to just touch base about the Facebook groups that you talked about recently. I wanted to share another aspect of them that I've seen very helpful. I've seen parents in the Facebook group who are on the ground in the vicinity of the college often offer to help an ill student, recommend a place to get a car fixed, offer to house students who maybe have a late flight and the dorms are closing. So it's another aspect that there's some other things on those that maybe aren't so positive, but I've always been touched by parents who step up and say, hey, I'm here physically and I'm willing to help. Thanks so much for all you do.
Now, friends, I wanted to play these so you can see all the creative ways people can use these Facebook groups and some of the very specific types of knowledge that can be gleaned from these groups. All right, I'm also going to play the next two messages in a row because they're somewhat similar. They're in response to the episode on saving money on the cost of college by getting advanced course credit.
Hey, Mark and team. This is Emma from Texas. I'm a big fan of the podcast, listen to it all the time. And I wanted to send in a quick tip as a follow-up to the segment that I just listened to for the episode you did on Monday, February 23rd, 2026, where you were talking about being strategic with AP credit as a way to potentially lower college costs. Well, I know a lot of people know about AP credit and they know about dual credit or dual enrollment options. But I think one of the unsung heroes of the transfer credit game in college admissions are CLEP exams. These, as you know, I'm sure, are also offered by the College Board. But for listeners that don't know, CLEP stands for College Level Examination Program. And essentially, these are subject tests. There are over 30 of them. They're accepted at close to 3,000 colleges. And just like with AP and dual enrollment or dual credit options, of course, you have to check with your particular institution to see what they accept and how it might transfer and if there are limitations. But it really can be another viable option for transferring credit. And the other resource I'd like to point out when we talk about CLEP is there's a great nonprofit organization called Modern States. And Modern States is, again, a nonprofit. They have a mission to make higher education more accessible, make it more affordable. And so essentially what they do is they offer free online courses. They're taught by university professors, specifically targeted at those different subject areas that the CLEP exams are focusing on. And they really prepare students to be successful on that particular CLEP exam. And what's nice is those courses are free. Anybody over the age of 13 is eligible. And if you successfully complete the course, you can get a voucher from Modern States to take a CLEP exam at no cost. So it really is a great option for a lot of students. It's also great if maybe you're at a school where they don't have a ton of AP courses available, or dual credit is not really an option, and you're looking at ways to have more transfer credit options as you head into your first year. So it can be a really good option for that. And of course, it's also nice because if you do it through Modern States and you successfully complete that course, which I believe is a 75% on the course itself and a 75% on the final exam, you'll be able to earn a voucher in order to take that CLEP exam at no cost. Which is great. So I just wanted to mention that because anytime we talk about AP or dual credit, I think it's also great to throw the CLEP conversation in there. And I like people to know about Modern States because it's a wonderful resource and it's an organization with a great mission. Thanks again for all you do.
Hi, Mark and YCBK team. In your February 22nd episode, you talked about paying attention to AP, IB, and dual enrollment credits at different colleges and how that could save you money on your final college bill. I'm a mom of a high school senior, and while my daughter and I were evaluating different colleges through her application process, it was interesting to see how much this can differ from one school to another. She's decided to be a Wildcat and just enrolled at the University of Arizona for this fall, which we're really thrilled about. Based on information we found on U of A's AP credit by exam policy, it looks like she's going to earn about 40 units of course credits based on her AP exams. And even though she wants to double major, it looks like she'll still be able to graduate a semester early. This means it's going to save our family about $13,500 on tuition, fees, room, and board for that semester. Thank you so much for bringing this to everybody's attention. I also wanted to briefly mention that parents and students should not forget about CLEP exam credits, so be sure to check out Modern States' Freshman Year for Free program. YCBK interviewed David Weiss from Modern States a while ago, so take a look on the YCBK website for more info.
I really appreciate both of these listeners and their comments. One of the listeners pointed out that we did a real deep dive, like 90 minutes, might have been longer than that. David Weiss from Modern States. Now, if you missed that interview, it's easy to remember because it's number 100, interview 100. I'd strongly encourage you to go back and listen to that. But let me tell you why this resonated with me. Not only did we have David on episode or interview 100, but Adam Ochawat was on about a year ago. He did a 5-minute blurb recommending people check out Modern States and the power of CLEP. And for me, it was a really great reminder that I can't assume people have heard all of our content or they remember all of our content. And sometimes I have a tendency to think that way. Well, we've already covered that a lot. And in some ways, it's really great because if you notice, there was 2 listeners. One of them knew about the interview, mentioned it, recommended listeners listen to it. The other listener had no idea about that we'd covered it before. And that's exactly how our listeners are, right? Some of them have gone back. They're familiar with all our content. Maybe they've been listening for a really long time or they've gone back. And others start now and they just move forward and they don't ever go back. And that's our listener base. So for me, it was a reminder because I absolutely should have talked about CLEP courses 100% when I did that segment on checking out schools, AP, dual enrollment, and IB credit policy. So thank you, listeners, for that. And it's an opportunity to remind you guys, check out interview 100. Okay, next you're going to hear from a former student affairs employee and a former admission officer. And she has a great comment about the question that Carter and I discussed about somebody that's just playing video games all the time. And like, is there hope for them in this college admission process? So take a listen.
Hello, YCBK team. My name is Holly. I'm a former admission officer turned independent educational consultant out in California. I am calling because I finally just couldn't resist. I've been listening for a while, and so much of what you guys do to discover fit has a lot to do with student affairs, which is my background, in addition to admissions. But I had finally called because the mother who was worried that her child plays video games and nothing else, and would he get into any colleges, I just want to let her know she is not alone. And I can attest from personal experience. I have a freshman who is currently playing on an esports team at a college and even got a little bit of scholarship for it. It's actually a D3 school, but apparently esports is D1 everywhere. So he's having the time of his life telling people he got recruited for a D1 scholarship. In any case, just let her know that it's going to be okay and there's a college out there for him. And I'm confident that he should not stress over this too much. And more importantly, neither should she. Thanks so much for all your work. I enjoy listening to the podcast and wish you many, many more episodes. Bye.
Friends, I just love it when our listeners encourage each other with some specific knowledge that you have. So to take the time to reach out, particularly this mom, she's very concerned about her son. And you know what? That mom speaks for thousands of other moms who have that same concern. So thank you for sharing this. All right, next we're going to hear from a mom who has been going back into our archives. Let's listen.
Hi, YCBK team. My name is Patty, and I'm a longtime listener from the Chicago suburbs. I found your podcast when my oldest was starting the college process, and she is now graduated and out in the working world. You helped me with her process, my middle child's process, and I'm now starting on my youngest. I look forward to each episode and learn something new every week. What I really want to say today is thank you for so thoroughly archiving your back catalog on your website. As you know, all children are different, and my youngest child's process will be very different from his siblings. In particular, he wants to explore continuing to play a sport in college. I remembered a wonderful interview you did with the athletic liaison at Trinity University a while back, and I just re-listened to it with a whole new perspective. In addition, as my son and I build a list of schools for he and I to learn more about, I have found that you have already spotlighted many of them over the years. It's wonderful to be able to go back and listen and learn with new ears. Your podcast is such a treasure trove of information and a gift to all of us DIY parents. I'm truly grateful. Thank you for all that you do.
I really appreciate this message because I think the archives are a treasure trove. There's like over 800 hours of content there. And she specifically mentioned going back and looking at college spotlights. And a lot of times people will tell me that, like when they're traveling to visit a college, they like to listen to college spotlights of schools that they're checking out. I want to say a word about college spotlights, particularly when I interview someone. I'm trying to paint the picture with the warts. I'm trying not to just have a puff piece. To me, this is not the equivalent of somebody doing a info session, maybe a traveling info session on the road. And so I'll take you behind the scenes. It can be kind of challenging because I have to be respectful of the fact that nobody's going to come on the podcast if they don't think they're going to advance their institution, right? And any senior admission officer, they have to be cognizant of the fact that the president or board members may be listening. Now, it's extremely common for one of two things to happen. I send a sample set of questions out ahead of time, but I make it very clear that this isn't going to be scripted. It's going to be extemporaneous, and we're not just going to stick to that. I'm going to have follow-ups, and we're going to go off script. Well, it's not uncommon at all for somebody to nix a question up front and say, I'm sorry, I just can't talk about that. Nor is it uncommon for somebody after the recording to say, would it be okay if we deleted this one segment? In fact, that happened last week. I'm always going to do that. I mean, I'm trying to strike a balance. You can invite somebody kind of into your living room and give them an opportunity to talk about their school and then have them walk away feeling like you just put a fire hose in their face. But to me, I'm trying to really paint an accurate picture of what these schools are. I'm trying to let them articulate their strengths and their struggles. I mean, it's a really healthy balance. Not that long ago, I had someone say to me afterward, wow, I didn't know it was going to be like 60 Minutes style. They didn't use the word interrogation, but it was that was implied. But even still, that person was still glad that they came on. But there's a fine line. I never want to go to the point where people feel like I kind of regret coming on here because those questions were too tough. So anyway, I'm just pointing this out. We're trying to do something a little different than just have a school come on and just let them tell you only how great they are. So check out the archives if you haven't done that. The next message is also a comment about the archives. So we'll play that.
Hi, I am a mom from New Jersey and second-time question asker. It is now February, and my senior is luckily having to choose between several really good college options that she got into early action. The problem is how the heck she decides. And so I went to look and see if you had previous interviews or podcast topics about how to actually help kids make the decision. I'm really cognizant of not trying to force my opinions on her and try to help her make her own decision, but it's hard because she's 17. She hasn't had to make any of these big life choices before. It all feels very made up to her. And honestly, she's really nervous about leaving home, and she's struggling to even imagine what it would be like to be somewhere brand new with brand new people in a brand new setting. We will, of course, go to some of the college acceptance days, but if you have a previous podcast for us to listen to, or interviews or resources or suggestions, we would greatly appreciate it. I did try using the search bar on the website, but didn't have good luck. Maybe I was using the wrong terms. Thank you so much.
Now, on the one hand, it's sad to me that this listener couldn't find any content we did on how to make a decision. But I'm mostly stoked that they came on a Speakpipe and left a message rather than just, go on about their way. Why? Because we did a very deep dive. I actually interviewed Susan and got her perspective on, Susan, what's your advice to someone who says, how do I decide? Then I interviewed Julia. Julia, what's your advice for someone that can't decide? Then I interviewed Lisa, who came at it more from a psychology standpoint. Well, that was a nice complimentary segment. And then I asked Amanya to morph all of the individual interviews together into one audio segment, and they're up on our website, yourcollegemykid.com, under interview 202. Here I am telling you guys, don't confuse interviews and episodes, and then I do it. So interview 202, you hear it's lengthy because it's basically 3 segments combined into one, but it's a really important conversation, right? This is what most seniors are asking right now. How do I decide? So I'm so glad that this listener gave me an opportunity to talk about interview 202. It's our advice for you on how to make a decision. Now, I want to say a word about when you leave a Speakpipe message. When you leave a Speakpipe message, you have an option of including your email or not. And if you don't include your email, it pops up for me as anonymous, and I can't even reply back. And that's what happened in this case, because I would have responded to this listener right away, and I would have said, go to interview 202. And those of you who left Speakpipe messages, sometimes I respond back. There's a reply option where I can reply right back to you right in Speakpipe, and you hear me speaking back to you. And a lot of times that's really appropriate. So one request I would make to you is don't list yourself as anonymous. You don't have to say your name or your state on the verbal part of the message. Although I tell you, we do like it if you at least say your state, even if you'll say like a mom from, Arizona. It adds a personal component to it. Or even if you say something like the Pacific Northwest instead of Oregon, that is helpful. But if you don't choose not to do that, we're still going to play your message. And if you go anonymous, that's fine. Just know there's no way that we can ever comment back. That's still your decision. I'm talking about in terms of how you record it on Speakpipe. But there have been many a time that somebody has asked me a question about something like kind of time sensitive, But because they listed themselves as anonymous, there was literally no way I could get back to them. Like, even now, I'm just hoping that this listener actually hears this episode, because I have no way of letting her know. Episode 202. All right, now we're going to hear a listener with three really prescient comments I felt about three different topics. So let's play this, and I'll make a few comments.
Hello, Mark and team. You guys are fabulous. Thank you so much for everything you do. A couple thoughts. One, I enjoyed the Penn students. I'm hoping that you will have students from colleges that admit more than 50%. Listening to the Penn young ladies, they're very impressive, but the truth of the matter is very few students get into a school like Penn. So I'd love for you to help market some of the less competitive schools with impressive kids like the ones you had on Penn. Number two, Hillary mentioned that when a parent unsubscribes, that it will cause the student to be unsubscribed somewhere in the funnel. If there's a way you could verify when that is that after the student's been admitted, or is that earlier in the process? That'd be great. And then one other thought or concern is I keep hearing this rumor, I guess it's not really rumor, that UNC deferred students this year. Mark has mentioned it a couple times. It's our understanding that UNC has not done any deferment for years. So, you always say that UNC is the school that it denies more than any other school. And partly that's because they do not defer. So if you can kind of clarify, maybe you saw some students be deferred from UNC over the last couple of years. We've only really seen wait list or denials in the early action and I guess regular decision round. So love to get a clarification on that. Once again, thank you so much for all you do. Obviously, I'm an IEC who listens to you twice a week. Take care. Thanks.
All right, let's talk about the first thing, the students from UPenn. She really enjoyed the interview, but had a suggestion. Can we have some schools with higher than 50% admit rate? I so appreciate this comment. I am very, very conscious of the fact that I do not want to be the podcast that's obsessed with the Ivy League or that has a T20 mentality. There are so many podcasts out there like that. And if that's what people want, fine, you can go find that in that space. However, we have many listeners interested in those schools. So what I'm trying to do is to do both. And those are great schools, but there's also other schools that are great. So, for example, I am interviewing a couple of students a week from today, actually, on San Diego State. So San Diego State is a school that's got a very high admit rate for out-of-state students. In-state, it's more like 1 in 3, but out-of-state, it's more like 8 in 10. Last time I checked. So I am trying to do this. I'm still gauging how much you guys find these helpful. I've done one with RIT now. I've done one with Duke. I've done one with UPenn, and now I'm doing one with San Diego State. It would be my expectation that we would do more schools that are not the uber selective than the selective. But once again, a mixture. And one thing I like about students is they can be, sometimes they will say things that an admission officer won't say. So that's, one thing I really like. Once again, we're trying to present the strengths and the struggles. I'm trying to paint the picture with the warts, not the picture after all the makeup has been applied and you can't see the warts. I just think that's most helpful. And I think that's what you guys are looking for. We're trying to pull back the marketing curtain and let you see the schools for who they are. At least we're trying our best. Now, there was a specific comment that Hillary had made about how to unsubscribe. Because Hillary was referenced there, I don't want to speak for her. I'll reach out to her and ask her to comment. One of the cool things with Speakpipe is I can just say to Hillary, hey, Hillary, can you go to Speakpipe and comment? And sometimes that's easier than scheduling a time when two people are incredibly busy for us to get on together. I've done that many, many times. A lot of times an interview will be over and I'll think of a question I didn't ask, or somebody will get back to me and say, snap, I wish I would have said blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, we've got a solution. You got an orange button. You got 5 minutes. You got the mic. Go for it. speakpipe.com/YCBK. So I'll ask Hillary if she can comment there, and I'll try to get that on definitely in the month of March as a follow-up for you on that part. And there was a third comment here. Let's see. UPenn and students. Oh, yes, UNC. So, there's a verse in the Bible that says, where there are many words, transgression is unavoidable. And that's really true, right? I have a very bad habit, and I've been trying to break it, and I got busted on it. And that is, sometimes I say waitlist when I mean defer. Sometimes I say defer when I mean waitlist, because they have some similarities, right? In both cases, it's you're being told to wait. Not yet is really the response. It's not an accept. It's not a deny. It's like, wait until we have more information. So they're similar to that. But of course, a deferral happens in the early round, where a waitlist happens in the regular round, where there's no more rounds later. But in both cases, it's kind of like a wait till later, wait till we have more information, wait till we see what the other applicants do. And the deferral rate, it can be wait till we see who else comes in the regular round. In the regular round, it can be wait till we see what our yield is like, how many of the people we've already admitted enroll, and see whether we need to go to you, which are in fact an insurance policy, if we don't get our yield in the waitlist round. So there's a lot of similes, but they're different. And sometimes I confuse them verbally. And so I apologize for saying that. You are absolutely correct. UNC does not defer. They either admit, deny, or they waitlist you, and those are the three options that they use. I said this once before in the podcast. I sat down with a few different people in the UNC office, in their office in 2024. And they shared their stats. 6% out of state admit, 3% waitlist, 91% deny. I did notice an uptick last year. I noticed that kids that I didn't see get in, were getting in. I've also confirmed that with some other counselors. I've also confirmed that with UNC specifically, all the way to the top, because they are taking 500 more kids every year over 10 years, even that most of those are in state. It's about an extra 100 kids out of state. They get in, and I felt like those were some of my kids that were getting in last year, that in the past I was just used to them just getting denied. In fact, just from our own internal data, UVA was harder than UNC last year as an out-of-state student. I would not have said that a few years ago. UVA has become incredibly, incredibly tough as an out-of-state admit. And it's kind of an example, by the way, where you can't just look at stats. Because I was looking at stats, and Georgia's admit rate out of state is around 22%. UNC looks around the same, but UVA is harder to get into than UNC. In fact, UVA is harder to get into from Northern Virginia than UGA is to get in out of state. So stats can be a little deceiving. They're both really hard to get in. But UVA, to me, is probably the hardest school right now out of state. But I'm still waiting on UCLA and Berkeley's information to come out this year. And by the way, Georgia Tech has some states that they have a 4% admit rate or lower. And that's something that I've confirmed. So that's crazy. But anyway, the point is, I'm going off on a tangent. These are some of the hardest schools in the country to get into. Oh, let me say this. I'm going off script here. This has nothing to do with the listeners, but I told you I was going to drop some tidbits throughout several weeks on my Florida trip. So one of the things there's a lot of buzz of in Florida is Florida looks like they are going to go to a new plan where 95% of their admits will be from the state of Florida. 95. Now, one of the counselors who was with me on my fly-in program to Lynn was so hot at UF because their valedictorian did not get in. This is somebody from kind of the Tampa, Clearwater area. The valedictorian of their school did not get in UF. And so people are up in arms, and they're putting pressure. And this is moving fast through their state legislation, and everything looks like it's going to go. I'm expecting it to go forward. And when that happens, UF, which to me already, according to our data, is the 8th hardest public school to get into as an out-of-state student. Whatever order you want to put like Berkeley, UCLA, UNC, UVA, Michigan, Texas, and Georgia Tech. Those are the 7 hardest according to our data. Florida being the 8th hardest. Florida's going to move up. Is going to be an absolutely brutal admit out of state. So keep your eyes on that, because if you're a DIYer and you're trying to build a list and Florida's on your list and this legislation, it's all systems go, which is I'm expecting, it's just going to be absolutely brutal to get into Florida. So it's just something to be aware of. But anyway, I want to thank the listener for making that correction. All right, let's listen to a parent commenting on winning outside external merits scholarships, particularly the membership style.
Hi, Mark and the YCBK cast. Thank you for all you do. This is Kara. I'm an IEC in Arizona, and I just listened to your podcast about scholarships, things that kids should do, and whether or not it's a waste of time or worth their time. And I loved all of that. Very helpful information. And I wanted to just add one little tidbit that perhaps you could share with your listeners. In regards to the workplace type scholarships or the membership scholarships, my son happened to work for an animal conservation place here in Arizona where he had spent over 700 hours of volunteer time, starting at the time that he was in middle school all the way through high school, where eventually he also had a part-time paid position. And he loved that place so much, and they did not have any sort of scholarship in place, but they were willing to create one for him. So what we had our son do is inquire whether or not there was something that he could do to help that organization. And what we landed on is he helped start a GoFundMe. He actually spearheaded a GoFundMe to raise funds for improved enclosures for the sulcata tortoises, which sounds very specific, I know, but that's a big deal out here in the desert. And they have so many tortoises at this particular sanctuary and not enough enclosures for them. So my son started a GoFundMe. It kind of went viral locally, and he was able to raise over $6,000 for the organization that was so near and dear to his heart. And in return, it's an NPO here in town. But in return, the sanctuary took a different chunk of money from some outside donators and benefactors and created a scholarship for my son. So it was kind of a win-win. He raised over $6,000 for them, and they gave 10% back, not from the monies that was raised, but from a different pool of money from a large benefactor in town who was so impressed with our son's efforts to do something so good for the sanctuary that they gave basically 10% from a different pool of money, and they created a small scholarship for our son. So he raised over $6,000, and he was gifted a scholarship for just over $600 for his efforts. So sometimes you just have to think outside the box. Again, that was somewhere where he had volunteered and worked for many, many years, and he loved the place dearly, but they didn't have a scholarship program, but they were willing to create one and work with our son. So it was really a win-win for both the organization and for our son. So just wanted to put that out there. If your kid is working somewhere where they maybe don't have something like that already in place, it does not hurt to ask, because maybe somebody will help think outside the box and create something new just for your kid. So wanted to put that out there. Thank you so much for all you do. You guys do a great job. Thanks.
I wanted you to hear that as an example of creativity. This was wonderful. Look at the creativity that the student employed to win an outside scholarship merit style, membership style. And lastly, I want to hear from a mom commenting on the Luther College Spotlight.
Hey, Mark and team. This is Megan. I'm the one who suggested that you interview Luther College. Thank you so much for doing that, by the way. I really enjoyed listening to that episode. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I liked hearing what was so special about Luther, even though I already knew all those things. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that the interview that is up on your website right now is linked to Kev from University of Utah. So when you click on Matt Beatty's interview, it's playing the University of Utah. Thought you might like to know. Thank you.
All right, this should be fixed. I've sent out an emergency request to fix this, and it was probably my fault. I probably gave our webmaster the wrong link, but I know how to correct it. So, and I've corrected it. So hopefully it's up. He's usually really good he's got a special email for emergency requests. But the other reason I wanted to comment on this is, please, if any of you ever notice anything like this, please let me know. You can do it through Speakpipe, or you can do it by going to your collegebound kid at gmail.com. Or you can text me, 404-664-4340, whichever is easier for you. But I do not want somebody going to listen to a Luther College spotlight only to hear University of Utah. Like, no, that's not cool. So anyway, thank all our listeners for all your contributions. Friends, you now have 7 books you can pick from if we play your Speakpipe question or comment or tip on the air. We have our 4 Princeton review books, The Best 390 Colleges, College Admissions 101, Essays That Kick Apps, and Princeton Digital SAT Prep. Our 3 new editions are The Calm College Method by Lisa Ruff and Linda Depker, paperback or Kindle, Peter Pitt's Small College Magic Kindle version, and College Unmazed has a book, Your Guide to Design and Document Your Home School by Holly Ramsey and Michelle Everett, paperback edition. Our authors have generously agreed to cover the shipping and handling. Just send your name and full address, the book that you want, and the episode number where we aired your Speakpipe question or tip. Please send that to your collegeboundkid at gmail.com. We'll forward your request to the authors. And now let's transition to part 2 of 4. Hearing from Katie and Amy and Joe and Reid on athletic recruiting.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, we've reached part 2 of our interview with Katie, Amy, Joe, and Reid on tips for athletes who want to play in college. In part 2, Amy discusses how a player can find out the level that they can play at. Joe talks about how much you can learn from studying the rosters of current teams. Reid talks about the best way to reach out to colleges once you're interested in them. Reid also talks about the importance of video and the importance of having an effective call to action in your emails. Katie talks about using social media outreach, and she talks about how to tell if a coach is serious about you. Katie talks about the importance of following up. Joe talks about what coaches you should reach out to. And Joe talks about athletic resumes. Listen and enjoy. So I want to talk in depth about 3 topics that I think are really tricky in this process. The first is trying to figure out what level the athlete can actually play at. My own daughter played high-level travel basketball. Her personal trainer was telling her she was a D1 player. Her coach, who played at Vanderbilt, said she was a D1 player. We did utilize one of the recruiting services. 2 different people there. One said she was D1. One says she may be D1, but she probably won't play a lot. She'd probably be better high-level D3. So there were mixed opinions. And I kind of had an opinion. And so it was all over the place in terms of getting that read. And we sort of had as good a support system as you could find. I find with the AAU programs, it's very tricky because they, it's easy to bounce around, right? And they kind of want to make their players believe that the world is possible. And then they sometimes really have straight talk and say, I think you're a D3 player or lower D1, or I don't know if you'll get a lot of time. A lot of times people will be like, oh, you don't believe in my kid. Let me go bounce to an organization where someone's going to tell me what I want to hear. So there's an incentive sometimes for them to overinflate the level that, and I feel that's what happened with my daughter, by the way. So what is your advice on how someone can figure out the level? Because that's extremely important, as you know. Otherwise, you'll waste all kinds of time and money traveling to places that you're non-competitive at. So I'll just take them one at a time. That's one of my big questions for you, how a player can figure out the level they can play at. Obviously, there's utilize your service, and you guys are experts in this. I know that's one answer, and it may be a very good answer, but beyond just saying hire us, that's what we do. Give some pointers on this. Amy?
I can start. I can. First of all, I always point out to my families that it's counterproductive to place labels on the level that a student athlete can play. because ultimately the decision on what opportunities exist is the decision of the coach. And we cannot read the mind of coach, any coaches, right? And I'm talking about college coaches. I'm not talking about our club coaches that are, building us up and have an incentive to do so. So I first caution families from using any labels. If a student athlete wants to play their sport in college, it's important to have a good, well-balanced list. So let's shoot for Division I if that's what they think they want to play. But let's also put some great D2s that match the holistic profile of the student athlete on the list. Let's also put some Division IIIs that match the holistic profile. When I'm talking about holistic profile, I'm talking about geographical preferences, academic preferences, social preferences, major goals, career goals, all of these good things that are essential and part of this process. I actually don't think that families need to hire anyone to help them. And there are lots of services, as you found out, that are more than happy to take your money to place you. And that's just not a thing. I mean, the thing, and I can say this after, coaching for 23 years and being a recruiter, I recruited athletes hard for 23 years. I never once used a service to find my athletes. And so the way that I found my athletes, and this is critical and this is crucial for all families to know, I found them because the student athletes reached out to me and they advocated for themselves. Yes, I went to tournaments. I went to high-level national tournaments and I recruited at those tournaments and I watched the players play there. But these high-level tournaments, as you know, with your daughter, with these AAU tournaments, there are so many kids playing. I didn't know where to go to watch if it wasn't for a student athlete reaching out to me and saying, Coach, I've looked at your program. I'm very interested in the school. It seems like it could be a fit for me. I would love for you to take a look at me. And that's the single most important factor in this process. It's much more effective than placing any label and just pinpointing a label. So I would say create a broad list. Let's make sure it's well balanced and let's reach out to coaches and let them know of your interest. That's how you're going to be successful in this process. That's how you're going to know ultimately where you're supposed to be.
And I would add on, something that I think we all do with our students and something that we talk about in the course that we run for counselors and for families is utilizing the rosters online of the different schools that you might be interested in, because you can get a lot of really good information on there. You're talking about basketball, you go onto a Division I Power 4 basketball website and you can see, how tall is everybody? You play a certain position and you're 6 inches shorter than everyone on that current roster. It's going to be really tough for you to get recruited by that team. If you obviously like swimming and track and time-based sports are the easiest because it's like there are websites. This is how fast you go from A to B. Are you close to that? Yes or no? Baseball, there's a lot of, you can go on and you'll see, they list like, oh, this guy in high school was a, 3-time all-state. He led his team to this. He bat 450. He, did all these great things. And it's like, all right, do you look like that profile? Now let's look at a, lower level Division I. Let's look at Division II. Let's look at Division III. And where in these rosters do you look like the players that are there? And you can kind of get a sense from that. And then you take that information and do everything that Amy just said.
I have a really good example of what you were talking about there, Joe. So, like, for a while, my daughter was looking at the Sunshine State Conference. So all those schools, you guys know all those schools. It's a really high-level D2 conference for women's basketball. And when we looked at University of Tampa's roster, which is one of the schools in the Sunshine State, almost every player on that roster was a D1 transfer that was like 22 and 23. And that coach had decided to snip off, D1 players that weren't playing and recruit them. And so that's kind of a good example of that. So I'm going to ask my other two questions, and because we're kind of covering all of this at one time. And Amy, you really spoke to one of them. So one of my questions is, what's your best strategy? Part of that is being proactive, right? and reaching out, extremely important. But then how do you reach out is part of that. Our resume is important. What do you put in the introduction? Do you do showcases? Do you do team camps? How do you know which team camps to do? So there's a lot in there. And then the other question big question I have is, how do you know who's serious about you? So if anybody wants to, those are like my three big questions. Like, how do you know what level? How do you know who's serious about you? And what's your best strategy? So anybody want to speak to any of those things?
Reid, do you want to take it?
Sure, I can kick it off. Yeah. So I think Amy did a really good job of kind of creating the base. I'll kind of address the, sort of best way to start, reaching out and sort of connecting with these schools, right? I think Amy explained it perfectly. The number one thing you need to do is understand that sports are a piece of who you are in college and not who you are in college. So as you start to develop that list, start to understand where you're a major fit, where you're a location fit, start to build out this, relatively, it can be a broad list. It can be multiple divisions, different areas. That's where you want to kind of start with that piece. And then it's that matter of being proactive and reaching out to those coaches. I think the other element that we want to sort of highlight there too is a level of consistency, right? I think a lot of kids are under the impression that, okay, I'm going to reach out one time, maybe I even reach out twice. They didn't respond, or they just told me they're going to keep an eye. Okay, maybe they don't like me. And that's coaches get paid to coach. They don't get paid to email. And so a lot of times you may not be getting the responses back or the attention back that you would expect, over a text conversation or something like that. You shouldn't let that dissuade you as you continue to reach out. The important piece is being very kind of meaty in the things that you're providing, right? So you want to obviously introduce yourself. They're going to want to know GPA. If you've got a test score, they're going to want to know test score. If you have an eye-catching statistic, if you have an impressive UTR in tennis, if you have an impressive 2K erg time in rowing, you want to put that in the subject line to try and convince that coach to spend the extra 10 seconds on that the rest of that email, right? So that's going to kind of be that hook, if you will, to bring them in. Once you've got them in, introduce yourself, obviously, height, weight, core demographics, where you're going to school, where you're living, those types of things. And then highlights of your high school career, right? And we kind of talk about milestones in the high school age frame. So if we're playing on varsity, if we're hitting particular metrics for our sport that are noteworthy, if we're competing in particular national tournaments or notable events that team would know about or that sport is aware of, those are things you want to mention as well. So anything you can do to differentiate yourself from someone else who might be reaching out in that space. Having a coach reference on there is a great idea, whether that be your varsity coach, your club coach. Different sports have, football, it's going to be a varsity coach, right? Baseball, a lot of times it's going to be a travel coach. It's just kind of dependent upon the culture of the sport that you play. So giving coaches somebody else to talk to get sort of another angle of the type of player you are, the effort, their own opinion, things like that. So making it very easy for coaches to kind of identify you, understand what your differentiators are, who they can speak to get additional information on you, and then really what your call to action is, right? You want to understand, what are the next steps in this process? Is there something that I can learn? In the same way that if you have a conversation with somebody, you don't want to get to the end of the conversation and just sort of leave it hanging and force that person to have to then do the work to keep that conversation going. Have a call to action. Video is something, for any non-timed sports, having some sort of video, having something to show a coach is almost always going to be valuable. You can say as many things as you want on paper, but I know Joe, he's going to want to see somebody, even if it's just hitting in the cage. You want to see how that person moves. You want to see how they swing. You want to see how they field, something like that to give coaches something to work off of and encourage them to want to continue to talk to you. That's kind of what, we all sort of instruct our kids to work on from an initial reach out, initial introduction standpoint when we're being proactive in that space. I've talked enough about the email piece now, so I'll kind of step back and see if anybody wants to talk about social, other aspects, keeping up. I'll pass the floor.
Sure, I can just address. There are multiple ways to reach out to coaches. Email is one that we try to encourage families to utilize as much as we can, or as much as they can, because they're the ones doing the work. There are, of course, social media is another way to reach out to coaches, both by following a program, but also direct messaging through their various pages. To speak to the question of how do you know when a coach is serious, or how do you read between the lines on some of that communication, I sort of, after a student athlete has sent that initial introduction email, I sort of tell families, look, you got to what you're going to get back in response may vary. You might hear from a coach Thanks for sending us your video. Keep sending us more video. We'll keep taking a look at you and fill out our recruit form online. And here's our list of camps, right? That's sort of the non-response response. That is a thanks so much. Join our mailing list and we'll keep tabs on you, right? Which is not bad, but it is not the ideal scenario that you're really looking for. What a student athlete is truly looking for in a response that means that you're actually moving forward in that sort of recruiting funnel for a coach is a response that says something personal about, hey, we looked at your video and we really like X, Y, and Z. We think you could be a really interesting recruit for our program and we'd love to get on a phone call with you. Or we're going to come watch you at your upcoming showcase tournament and we'll make sure, to chat with you afterwards, whatever that looks like. And again, appropriate for wherever the student athlete is in their journey and the age and what the rules allow. But those are the kind of conversations that mean that you are actually caught the attention of a college coach who may be, and I caution may be interested, because just because you get that far doesn't mean that you are getting an offer, right? That just means, okay, you made it past the first round of review and now you're in this kid could be interesting pile. So that's why it's important that student athletes continue to follow up. They continue to send, if they're going to tournaments, sending the tournament schedule beforehand, following up with their video afterwards. Keep going, because if you just stop communicating with coaches and assume that they're now watching you because they sent one email back, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? You need to be proactive. These kids have to be, to learn how to manage that follow-up in a responsible way. And once you do have a call with a coach, that initial call could be, knowing who you're talking to is important. Are you speaking to the recruiting coordinator? Are you speaking to an assistant coach? Are you speaking with the head coach? That can certainly be meaningful. And then again, continuing to have a plan for how frequently you follow up, again, has to do with how old you are and how close you are to getting those, decision-making process for a coach to want to say, hey, we'd love to do a pre-read on you. We'd love to have you come to campus. We'd love to, again, moving that process, forward. But it takes a couple rounds. It does not, this is not a one-time effort. So it's very hard when coaches make the effort to communicate. You have a call with a coach, you get all excited about it, and then all of a sudden they ghost you. And I've got this happening with a couple of my athletes right now. What do you mean? They told me on the call they were interested, and now they won't even respond to any of my messages. Unfortunately, coaches are trying to manage hundreds of, potential recruits, again, depending on the sport. And sometimes that's what you get. That's a bit unfortunate, but kids need to learn casting. That goes back to what Amy said about casting that wide net and making sure that you continue to follow up with lots of different types of coaches, so you don't funnel yourself into one specific sort of type of school.
And friends, we're not going to cover pre-reads now, but we did literally a 7-part series on pre-reads. You can go listen to that if you go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, put in Andy Strickler, and you'll see we literally did a 2-hour session just on pre-reads. Friends, let me make it easier for you. Just put interview 206 YCBK in Google, and you will see the interview. The official name is Andy Strickler on athletic pre-reads. But there are a couple more follow-ups that I have around reaching out, commonly asked questions that I'll get. One is, do I do an athletics resume? Is that a good thing to attach a one-pager? If so, what are the things you like in an athlete's resume? Secondly, do you reach out to the head coach, or do you copy the head coach and the recruiting coordinator if one is indicated? Is it on the commonly asked question I get on this topic of reaching out? And then also for the video, right? Like, coaches don't have time to see a full game. So what's your recommendation in terms of like length of highlight reel, or do you like a highlight reel and a half game, full game? Like, those are all questions that frequently come up. So who wants to answer any of them? I know I broke the rules of question asking multiple questions at once. But
So I'll kind of tackle it a little bit from experience. I was the lowest man on the totem pole at multiple different Division I baseball programs, which meant that all emails were funneled to me, and then I distributed them amongst everybody. I think general rule, I think, everybody has a different style, but generally, emailing all the coaches copied on one email is a good practice. That way they can do internally what they do with it. And then on the or on the resume piece and the video piece, it's definitely different sport to sport. But personally, I don't care about an athletic resume very much. I think you can put pretty much everything you need to say into an email if you have social media. You have your bio and your stats and everything like that up at the top. And this is such a marathon, like Katie was kind of saying. You're not sending one thing and then getting recruited. You're sending over and over and over and over and over. And when I was coaching baseball, I can tell you from experience, all I cared about was the video. And that was the first thing I was looking for. And that's why I tell kids now, like, assume that you've got a coach who is pulling into his parking spot and then walking 50 feet into the office and getting out of the car. And during that walk is looking at his phone and opening your email. And all I would do was look, is there a video link? If there was, click on it, watch it for 10 seconds. And if I'm intrigued, you've earned 10 more seconds of watching it. And it's like, all right. And then if I like the video, now I'll go back to the email and I'll say, okay, what's your GPA? What are you saying about yourself? What are your stats? Where are you playing? All that kind of stuff. But really is like, for the video sports, video is absolutely crucial. You can't write an email talking about how good you are that is so wonderful that you're going to get recruited. Coaches need to see you, and the video is the gateway into that to try to get them to come and visit you. So, and that can be different for, swimming and track and things like that, and tennis that you have a UTR, and golf where you have this 72-hole score, but in all the sports that have much more subjectivity to them, basketball, football, baseball, soccer, video is absolutely crucial. And then it's just different sport to sport. Baseball, it's a lot more individual. It's you versus a pitcher. So if you give me one swing, one at bat, and then some batting practice stuff, or a pitcher, the bullpen, and then some game video, great. I know soccer is a lot more of like, we want to see some game footage to see how you move and interact with everybody. So it just comes down to sport, but that's a little bit of the gist of how we look at it.
And when you say also school to school, like I'll give you an example. A student I'm working with this year was looking, I'll name a name, Washington and Lee. Washington and Lee literally sent them a template of a resume that they like. So they must like it because they forwarded it to me and say, hey, can you help me with this? The school has sent me sort of this template that they like. So even something like a resume could vary from school to school.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like that. And that could also come from like the admissions office as well, where it's just like, hey, this is something that our admissions people want to see, is like it all laid out perfectly like that. And I think the best practice is just like, if a coach tells you to do something, do it, and do it exactly the way that they said to do it, and go from there.
I had a follow up on, go ahead, Amy, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to that. Like, there is value for our students to create a resume and to have to reflect on everything that they've achieved, right? It helps to build their confidence and gives them some pointers to talk about when they're interviewing with coaches, right? This is like their first job interview, the whole recruiting process. So there's value in that. But saying that, as a coach like Joe, if I got an email from a kid with an attached PDF of a resume, I literally never opened it. What I wanted was the information that our admissions office wanted and they requested, and I would give that to the students when I was ready to do the pre-read process with them. And that's exactly how I wanted it, in that format, similar to what Washington and Lee is doing, because it streamlines my process and makes my process easier. And I just want to give a shout out because you mentioned Andy Strickler. I have a son at Connecticut College, and he's great. And the way they do their pre-read process is unbelievable. So yeah, great stuff there. And I'm sure that's a good listen.
Well, Andy's been at 5 schools, so it was really good because he pulled in different ways different schools do pre-reads. And as you know, some people, Some people you get academically qualified first and then athletically, and then some places athletically, then academic. So he brought in all of that nuance, which was good. Friends, this concludes part 2 of 3. Hope you join us next week for part 3 of 4. On Thursday's episode, Susan's going to join me to answer a question from a mom who wants to know, can you extrapolate from how personal or impersonal a college is when they recruit you, what the experience will be like when you actually get there? Susan, I love that question, and I'm moving it up to the top of the list. So we'll answer that on Thursday. Then we'll have the final part of Stephen Bird, senior writer and researcher for New America, discussing his research on how a number of colleges saddle low-income students with large Parent Plus loans. And then we've got a brand new interview, and it's kind of a double interview, really, so it'll play over the next 4 weeks. It's with Grace Robertson Lloyd. And if that name's familiar to you, Grace Robertson Lloyd joined Hillary Dickman and Kate Strickland to do our case studies. She's worked for Grinnell College for a decade. She's a Grinnell alum, and she's a regional in Denver, and she's also going to be attending the big event at St. George's High School in Lafayette on April 8th. Now, I say it's a double interview because I start out really going into the role of a regional. How's a regional different from a home-based admission officer? So we talk about that. That's what you're going to hear on Thursday. And then we get more really into doing a deep dive and a spotlight on Grinnell College in Grinnell, Iowa. Like, what makes it special? Strengths and struggles, Grinnell, right? Now, friends, on March 19th, episode 623 will go live. You're going to hear from Barbara Kalmus. Barbara's a college counselor in California. She's been doing this work for over 40 years. She's one of our affinity group leaders in our Counselor Connect. And she challenges me in that interview. And she says, you don't say it enough. And I kind of always have her words kind of ringing in my mind, to be honest with you. And so I know some of you are wondering what words are ringing in your mind. What is it that Barbara challenged you on? What is it that you don't say enough? And what it is this. Here you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success or your lack of success. And if you heard a big bang a second ago, it's because when I pounded the table, I knocked my cell phone over. But extra effects. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegebounkid.website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an admission officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our international admissions expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegebounkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, Check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.